Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Today, we're stepping straight into the kitchen to tackle a holiday baking classic that, honestly, shouldn't be nearly as stressful as it sometimes is. I'm talking about cookie icing. We are going to break down a beautifully simple, totally foolproof sugar cookie icing recipe that completely avoids the chalky, rock-hard brittleness of traditional royal icing. Whether you're prepping for a massive holiday cookie swap or you just want to decorate a weekend batch with the kids, this is literally the only tutorial you're ever going to need.
Seriously, are you tired of complicated, brittle royal icing? Because I know we've all been there. You spend hours perfectly baking your sugar cookies, right? Only to be met with an icing that awkwardly clumps up in the piping bag, aggressively runs right off the edges of your cookies, or, worst of all, dries so intensely hard that you almost chip a tooth when you take a bite. It kind of just takes the joy right out of baking. But there is a much, much better way. Today, we're exploring Chef Taha Ayad's sugar cookie icing recipe. This is the ultimate forgiving alternative. We're talking about a simple, smooth icing that spreads easily and dries with this gorgeous, professional-looking light sheen. It gives you absolute, total control without the stress of whipping egg whites or feeling like you're racing against the clock before the icing sets right there in the bowl. To get you completely comfortable with this recipe, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll talk about the perfect cookie icing. Second, the ingredients and their roles. Third, we'll go through a step-by-step mixing guide. Fourth, the all-important visual consistency test. And finally, number 5, decorating and storage tips. Okay, section 1, the perfect cookie icing and why this recipe works so well. The crucial thing to understand here is that this icing lives right in the sweet spot, somewhere perfectly between a really thin glaze and a stiff royal icing. What makes this version entirely worth your time is just how forgiving it is. You don't need a stand mixer or any special equipment. It requires absolutely no whipped egg whites, no precise timing. You literally just stir, adjust, and you're there. It spreads cleanly, settles beautifully on its own, and holds its glossy finish without ever becoming brittle. You are fully in the driver's seat without it slowing you down.
Moving on to section 2, ingredients and their roles. Let's get our mise en place ready.
All right, here are your exact measurements for a single batch. And by the way, this wonderfully yields enough to cover about 72 cookies, so plenty for a party. You'll need 1 to 2 cups of powdered sugar, 1 to 4 tablespoons of milk, 2 teaspoons to 1 tablespoon of light corn syrup or honey, 1/4 to 1 full teaspoon of your favorite extract. Vanilla, almond, and peppermint are fantastic choices. And finally, your food coloring. Notice how incredibly simple this base is? You probably have the whole shebang sitting in your pantry right now.
Now listen up, because this is a non-negotiable rule in Chef Taha's kitchen. Always sift your powdered sugar. The powdered sugar provides the essential structure for your icing, and it dissolves quickly, but only if it's completely lump-free. Taking that extra 60 seconds to sift is absolutely crucial. Skipping this step, well, that usually leads to tiny, stubborn clumps in your bowl that are incredibly hard. Actually, scratch that, pretty much impossible to fix later on. So don't skip the sift.
So you have 2 wonderful binding options to achieve that perfect texture. You can use corn syrup, which is what gives the icing its signature-like gloss and keeps it from drying too hard. Or, if you prefer, maybe for dietary reasons, you can substitute it with honey. Honey works wonderfully as a binder. Just keep in mind it adds a really lovely subtle flavor profile and will yield a slightly warmer, more golden color to your icing base. You make the call based on your desired shine and flavor.
Section 3, our step-by-step mixing guide. Let's bring this all together.
Here is exactly how we do it, step by step. Start by sifting that powdered sugar directly into a mixing bowl to get rid of any lumps. Next, mix in your corn syrup or honey and your chosen extract. Now, don't panic if the mixture looks really thick and kind of dull right now. That is exactly what it should look like before the magic happens. Then, slowly add your milk while stirring continuously. And finally, divide the icing into separate little bowls and gradually add your food coloring.
Okay, the absolute golden rule of this entire recipe comes down to the number 1. When adding your milk, you must add it just 1 teaspoon at a time. Seriously, milk controls everything here. Watch how the icing loosens with just a few drops. If you add too much milk all at once, your icing will instantly become way too runny, and then you'll spend unnecessary time trying to correct it by sifting in more sugar. 1 teaspoon at a time keeps you in total control. Once your texture is right, we move to color. Remember to add your coloring gradually. This is because colors actually deepen as they sit. What looks like a pale pastel pink at first can develop into a much stronger, vibrant color after sitting for just a few minutes.
Also, be absolutely sure to stir thoroughly each time you add a drop. Uneven mixing shows up very quickly as weird streaks once it dries on your cookies, and we want that perfectly smooth, professional finish.
All right, section 4, the visual consistency test. Let's find that sweet spot.
The magic numbers here are 10 to 15. To test your consistency, just lift your spoon and let the icing fall back down into the bowl. It should fall off the spoon in a steady ribbon. If that ribbon of icing smooths out and completely disappears back into the surface of the mixture within 10 to 15 seconds, boom, you hit the sweet spot. If it sits in peaks and doesn't smooth out, it's too thick. If it runs immediately and spreads too fast, it's too thin. Just rely on this 10 to 15 second visual check every single time.
Now, depending on your decorating plan, you can actually achieve 2 main consistencies from this exact same bowl. If you want to outline the edges of your cookies so the icing doesn't spill over the sides, you want a thicker icing. You'll stop adding milk a bit earlier so it holds its shape briefly before relaxing. Once your outlines are done, you can just add another drop or 2 of milk to the remaining batch to create a thinner icing. This flows slowly, settles quickly, and is perfect for flooding, which just means filling in the centers of those outlines for a flawless, flat finish.
And finally, section 5, decorating and storage tips, setting you up for success. Please, please take this to heart. Wait 20 to 30 minutes after baking before you even think about icing. You have to let those cookies cool completely. One of the most heartbreaking yet common mistakes home bakers make is icing too soon. Even the slightest warmth radiating from a freshly baked cookie is going to cause this beautiful icing to instantly melt, spread everywhere, and completely lose its structure. Patience is for sure your best friend here. Once you've decorated, here's the drying timeline you can expect. At hour 0, you apply the icing. After about 1 to 2 hours at room temperature, the surface of the icing will be fully set and dry to a light touch. But if you're planning on stacking these cookies in a tin or packaging them up as gifts, you really need to give them closer to 3 to 4 hours to dry completely all the way through. And hey, if your kitchen is particularly humid, always lean towards the 4-hour mark just to be safe. Now, what about leftovers? You can easily store leftover icing in the fridge for a few days. Just make absolutely sure to keep it tightly covered, because air exposure dries it out very quickly. When you're ready to reuse it, or even if your icing just thickens up while sitting out in the kitchen during a marathon decorating session, simply stir it well and add a few drops of milk to revive it. Freezing works too, but since this recipe literally takes only minutes to whip up, making a fresh batch is usually your best bet. I want to share this quote from Chef Taha Ayad, the creator of this brilliant recipe. He says, "Every recipe I share is an invitation from my kitchen to yours, and this one makes cookie decorating feel manageable, even on a busy day." I love that. It perfectly captures the warm, supportive, and practical philosophy behind this whole tutorial. Baking should bring you joy, not stress, and getting your consistency right is the key to unlocking that joy. So I leave you with this final question. Are you ready to start baking? You now know all the secrets to a glossy, perfectly set sugar cookie icing that won't crack under pressure. You have the step-by-step roadmap, the visual tests, and the troubleshooting tips. It's time to gather those ingredients, sift that sugar, maybe brew a fresh pot of coffee or some hot cocoa to pair perfectly with your creations, and bring a little sweetness into your kitchen today. Happy baking, everyone!